Hello, and welcome to the Alchemists Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people. And we really need it right now not because we need to be grounded, but because almost like we feel grounded, like actual punishment grounded, because we can't think too far ahead and we can't figure out how to make plans stick. If anybody else is feeling that way, we see you, and we're going to address why that is and what to do about it in this episode as she, grabs the
Grounding rock.
Yeah.
Dude, so frustrated. Like, that's the best way I can describe the energy. It is frustrating. It is frustrating energy this week. It feels annoying. It feels exhausting because it's like everything has halted. Like, genuinely, it's like the collective energy just like whoom, and like just stopped.
But it's not just halted. It's like everybody's got something they're waiting for. And everything is just stuck in this little limbo dangling there, but not coming back around yet. No. So the correspondence is like caught in the ether.
And it is so annoying. Like on a deep human level, just so frustrating and annoying. And so if you are feeling this, we see you, we get it. We are both also waiting on things. Multiple things, actually, some of which we've been waiting on for like 4 months, that are not yet coming through and should be. And it is very, very trying at the core of it. And it also is really annoying because it feels like no future plans can be concrete. And we wanted to address that today too, because if you look at it and you're like, I want to do something and you don't know what it is yet, it feels ambiguous. Any plans you might have for the future, you're constantly like, I don't know, because it's just you're caught in this like back and forth sort of wave of how does the future look, and you can't see it. Isn't that fun? So
yeah, that's been like, how as an intuitive, one of the things that's really fun is to just be like, yes, I have cards, or yes, I have astrology, or yes, I have this tool, but I can also lean into it or tap into the energy and see it for myself, and then use the cards or the astrology as support for that, or add a detail or whatever. I have had to really go cards or astrology first, and then intuition second for future sight things, especially. And I was at a wellness festival over the weekend. So I was doing mini readings back to back from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And people were like, what's coming up for me? And I was just like, let's look at the astrology, because it's all like dark in here. And it's just because, especially, I'm having a hard time seeing tangible things. Like I see future like building itself with little blocks, and then seasonally and things like that for timing. And the blocks aren't all, it's like the shipment hasn't come in yet. And it's going to this week, the stuff that we're going to be building with, but we don't know yet what we're building with. So we don't know what's going to be built.
Yeah. That's a very good analogy for it. I feel like that's exactly what it is. Because we're in this place where everything is shifting. And Krista and I have got this message, I don't know, since maybe March, I think, probably earlier than that everything that we're currently building for the future, which are very extensive and expansive things. We can't announce all of them on here. But you guys already know about the foreign retreat. And that was just like one piece of it. The other things that we're building, and we are not allowed to see what it looks like because everything around it's going to look different and it won't make sense. And every time since then, basically, we've tuned into the future on stuff. It's been that message of like, it'll be fine, but you can't see what it looks like yet because you don't know what it's going to look like around it, and it won't make sense. Constantly. It's exhausting. Every time we've tuned into it. That is what we've gotten for months. And that is all finally coming to a head this week. And we're finally going to get to see at least something about it, like something to do with that, and like a directional path and a timeline. Like those sorts of things are finally going to like clink, clink into place with the energy of the later half of this week.
Yeah. And it's, I don't want to pretend that we who are rehearsed, practiced, and trained in intuitive techniques and metaphysical techniques have handled this utterly gracefully We've tried. But if you're frustrated, don't let that also take away your confidence in your abilities. We're all frustrated, no matter how long you've been doing this. It was fun over the weekend. I got to say, I've been doing this for 22 years. People ask me a question and I still reserve the right to say, I don't know, because sometimes you just don't know. A lot of the times this happens around eclipses. And funny enough, the North Node is involved in this energy that I'm personally, I don't know how many other astrologers are putting this specific influence and meaning into this specific alignment coming up this week. But I personally feel like this fits the bill for what's going on and how things feel when they finally loosen up. It is halfway through eclipse season. So there was an eclipse season in April, May, and then it took a break. And there will be another one in October, November. We are halfway through that point between eclipses. So at this point, it's almost like things have been too quiet. And now we have big reveal. Uranus and Mars will conjoin on the North Node. And we've already been seeing hints of what this is going to look like and what this looks like on a global scale, because Mars, fire, Uranus can be freak weather events or surprising things, just direct pivots. So if you think of
on that note, if you hear our fans, it's a heat wave and we need the fans on.
There are wildfires in places. There aren't usually wildfires. Japan has a volcano erupting. So imagine surprising weather or natural events, because this is occurring in Taurus, involving fire and like the explosive energy of both Uranus and Mars. Now, that is one iteration of it. That is the Earth experiencing it. The collective is experiencing it in a totally different way. We don't explode like volcanoes. We have different ways of expressing that archetype. And I've already had people on my TikTok saying that other astrologers are saying that this is a collective, like a big thing with a lot of deaths in the collective. Whoa. Let's put on the brakes for that for a second. This is a spiritual podcast for grounded people. I have a ton of Earth in my chart. So when I look at astrology, I'm looking for the data and interpreting the data for you, blending my intuition in with it, because I have tried and tested that intuition. And I have Emily here as a check and balance, because brilliant intuitive, in case you didn't notice.
We use each other as checks and balances so ridiculously. Like, the biggest tip I can give anyone who's starting out on your spiritual journey is find a buddy who's also starting out on their spiritual journey and just check each other. Like,
do you have your psychic buddy?
Seriously, do you have your psychic buddy? Hold hands. It is a buddy system, like very much so, because I know that I wouldn't be half as developed as I am, which again, I've been doing this for like 15 years, which is a long time. But if it weren't for Krista, it's really
likewise. Nice. Because even just, it's like learning a language, being able to talk in a daily basis in the language or in the energy that you're in really helps you develop a confidence in letting it out when you're around people who don't necessarily speak the same language. So it's very helpful to be able to immerse yourself. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You talk constantly. It's fine.
It's wonderful. Actually, it's great.
It's lovely.
So the focus of this is we have a new moon coming up just before this conjunction with Uranus and Mars and the North Node. And we are not going to fluff this up and make you panic. We are going to be real about what the energy could look like. We've already talked about volcanoes and things like that. So it's not like we're going to hold our punches, but we're also not going to bring gloom and doom, because you can't do anything with gloom and doom. And if you're meant to move, you'll be able to move. If you're meant to just wait it out, you'll be able to wait it out.
Yeah. And alarmist language is it's become such a problem, especially in the spiritual community, because it gets views, it gets shares, it gets those things because it triggers an emotion in people. But it's our job as spiritual practitioners, or whatever we want to call ourselves, to make sure that we are holding space for people to not be dragged into these intense emotional experiences and not to know what to do with them, in a lot of ways, in my opinion anyway. And it's, to me, feels very negligent when people use incredibly alarmist language to bring people into a specific emotional state that they would get a lot of shares, reviews, or whatever. And maybe now at this point they've been trained to, okay, we're going to look for the alarmist thing. And that's not something intentional. And I'm not always saying it is by any means, but I think that it has become an actual significant problem in the spiritual community because of the fast nature of things like social media, et cetera, which is part of what we both endeavor not to do. We never use alarmist language of like, a bunch of people are going to die. That's like very intentional on our part. There's sometimes where we will give you the caution that you need for sure. But it's never going to be in a way that we're just trying to make you have some sort of feeling and therefore relate back to whatever it is we're talking about with that feeling. That's not ever our goal. And that's something that really bothers me about the modern day, like pop astrology, pop spirituality community, is so much of that. And that goes for everything from people who say they're Reiki practitioners to people who practice witchcraft to, I mean, astrology people to ghost watchy people. Like, it's everything. And there's sects of people and all of those that are just very, very alarmist. So just, we encourage you when you hear something like that, especially with things like this year, and it's going to just like a lot of deaths in collective, like pause and be like, what could that mean? It could be a lot of ego deaths in collective. It could be a lot of shifting.
I said.
Yeah. It doesn't have to match just that alarmist language. There's so many different ways of defining the words and stuff that come in, and find what feels right and aligned to you. Find that piece of it that feels like, oh, okay, that actually makes sense because of what I'm seeing. That actually makes sense because my guides just showed me 1111 right as I had that thought. Whatever it is that validates it for you, lean into that. And that's usually what we're just trying to encourage you to do. So that's just like my little disclaimer, because it's been something that has come up so much recently. It just bothers me. A really great microcosm where you can see this happen is anytime someone talks about fairies, and I'm not talking about fairy lore from like Ireland or Germany or places that have like a historic folklore around this. I'm talking about like modern day practitioners, and they're like talking about how
stole my key.
intentionally dangerous the fairies are. And having worked with many, 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 many different beings from many, many, many different dimensions and spaces, don't go into someone else's house and break their windows. Like, that's the main rule. And so whenever that comes up, I'm always like, this is so alarmist, and people who might be having these experiences now are going to fear them, which is the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. And yeah, so that's like a little microcosm. And again, not talking about the historic cultures around that, like they have their own myths and lore and practice around that, and I'm not in any way disrespecting that, but I'm talking about very modern interpretations of things.
And that's the important difference. The folklore has we know this because history has proven it time and time again. We know from experiential evidence, we know from recorded evidence, we have seen this happen, we have tested it, tried it. This is just a good rule of thumb. Whether it's something that you personally interact with or not, you can respect that, hey, for an awful long time, this has had meaning. So I can respect at least that. If it's just coming up, I encountered people over the weekend who have a limited scope of their astrological resources. And so me being someone who's obsessed with as close to the source of astrology and the beginning of astrology as I could get, having a conversation with them, there was a lot of things that were limited, had misconceptions in them as we understand it today based on the history. And there's just so much kind of instability, because if you're not building upon the foundation that's already been laid for you, you don't know what you're doing. So you're just winging it, which in some cases, winging is great, especially when you're following your own intuition in your own personal life and trusting your guides and things. Winging works. But when you're doing it in a larger thing that's like a society or a group or a culture or a cosm, I want to say more like a cosm, you want to take into account that you are in a larger environment, what's going on in that environment, it's just, magic is the same in magic as it is living daily life. Your daily life is you living in magic. And if you're seeking it and finding it in these alarmist examples, that's not actual magic. That's fear mongering or whatever. You want to find the magic in the things that feel good for you, the things that feel like they're calling you, that feel in alignment, that feel like you have a place at their table, not that are making you feel like you're falling off the side of the earth and into oblivion. We don't need that. That's not how it works in my experience of, again, 22 years, just like Emily, tons of time put into this, tons of trial and error. That's why we're doing a podcast, because we can condense that into our hour-long episodes for you. So this is part of your research. That's what this podcast is. It is in no way us telling you what to do. But as you're scrolling through social media, as you're reading up on books or articles or Wikipedia or anything that draws your attention, we hope that what we have to say also contributes to a well-rounded idea of what it is that you're pursuing.
Yeah.
I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah. Me too. Big time. And also, even with things that do have historical context, again, going to like that folklore touch, you can also do your own experiential understanding of that, as long as you're respectful and diving in a respectful way that you just want to learn. And that is like the philosophy with most spirituality, because honestly, there is no rules. That's the fucking point. It's very personal. It's a personal journey. So there's no rules. We will give you recommendations. We will give you parameters that we think are very safe to operate in, those sorts of things. But if anyone ever is like, this is a hard and fast rule, don't do this ever, 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 like that is a limiting belief. You don't need to subscribe to. So just my 2 cents on that space as well. And it is, if it feels right to you, give it a shot, as long as you're not doing anything to intentionally harm someone else. I mean, you could even do that if you wanted to, but like, that's where things get sticky. But yeah, so that's also the space that it comes in, because a lot of that alarmist language tends to come around very strict rules or very strict guidelines that people have decided to subscribe through. Yeah. One of my main examples of this, obviously we needed to talk about this today, which is very funny.
I know, right? I wasn't expecting to go here, but this is great. Lovely PSA we've got going on.
Yep. The rule of 3, anytime I ever have recommended a way of purging any sort of dense emotions or anything like that, I will always get people in there like, what about the rule of 3? Like, what, it comes back to you threefold or whatever. That is a limiting belief. It is not required. It is not required. It is not a universal 100% definite truth that is somehow needed to be ascribed to. Like, nope. So that is just an example of like some of those limiting beliefs in spirituality that you might come across when it comes to these sort of things.
Yeah, that sounds no bueno for me. Like, that sounds awful. Yikes. So a lot of this actually is coming into effect during this new moon as well. So thinking about how this is so layered. And I'm going to do my little spiel. It's funny. My mom in her work, and I used to work for her, has her spiels that she does regularly with her clients. And I have spiels that I do regularly on this podcast and with mine. And so shout out to my mom who watches this, and I love that about her. We're going to do a recap really quickly about the layers of astrology as represented by the planets, because all 3 of them are present in this, and it's going to help frame the ways you're going to be seeing this show up and what you can prepare yourself for. I hesitate to say expect, because I think with Uranus expecting the unexpected, especially with Mars there on the North Node, there is no expectation. It's very eclipse-ish in that it's like, just let it do what it's going to do. So we have the outer planets.
So it is the season of Uranus. Like Uranus is just doing the stuff. So if you ever want to channel Uranus and see what its message is for you, that would be a good idea.
Yeah. I talk to Uranus every time there's a transit, as you can see in my skits. And the skit that I have representing this transit this weekend made me laugh out loud, just like writing it. And it made everyone I show my skits to before I like actually finalize them, they laughed out loud too. So Uranus, by the way, can also be very fun. I recently had Uranus conjoin my sun on this same degree as everything's happening now. And a really exciting opportunity came up for me. So there's a lot of personal things to your specific natal chart that will let you know the nature of super positive, middle, attempting towards a challenge kind of situation that will come up for you. So if you're seeing people saying Uranus is the wrecking ball, I mean, yeah, but sometimes you want a wrecking ball. Sometimes it's fun to wreck stuff. Like who doesn't love the demo portion of redesigning a room? So there is good and there is challenging, and your chart will let you know more about how this is specifically showing up for you. We will give you the general nature of it, so you'll know what to expect in the outer world, especially, and how to react to that, and like how you want to choose to use your free will and your it starts with an A, whatever the word that means, like your ability to choose to navigate this. So if we think about the planets, you have got the sun through Pluto. Pluto is a planet. I will die on that hill for sure. So you have got the sun through Pluto. And if we start at Pluto and go back into Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, those are the outermost 3 planets. They are beyond the boundaries of what we can see from Earth. And then, so we call those the transpersonal planets. because they are so, they take so long to move that it becomes a collective experience. If you have Uranus in Taurus in your birth chart, there's a whole portion of your generation that also does. So you're experiencing these transits to Uranus together in that nature. It's not just an individual thing because those planets move slowly. You come into Saturn and Jupiter. They're the social planets. They move a little bit faster, but it still takes them a while. So you get those on a social level. This is like trends and things kind of coming up, and the interactions they make with other planets flavor that. From Mars into Mercury, including the sun and the moon, you have the transits that are more personal. These can change day to day. So it will affect you on a day-to-day basis, which is more to your personal life. That is like that. Thanks, Jack. That is the 101 of like how to understand the way the planets work. I could go into that a lot more, and we are planning an episode on talking about the planets and their natures and their energies. So put your questions in here for like what you'd like to know more about them, and that'll help guide us on that. But for today, what we're looking at is Uranus, a collective planet, is currently in a square that's not going to perfect. So it's just a little bit of a tension going on with Saturn. We saw most of this happening in 2021. Now we're just noticing it like kind of coming near and then separating again. So it's just like two magnets not quite connecting. So we have that going on with the socials. Also on the day of this new moon, Jupiter is standing still. And in fact, Jupiter is on the degree of standing still today that we're recording this, which is like a couple of days before the new moon. But if you're listening to this on the new moon, which is on Thursday, when we release this episode, Jupiter will be stationing retrograde. That's another reason why all the expansion that we've been experiencing, especially since the end of May, beginning of June, when Jupiter entered Aries, is starting to slow down. And that's frustrating because we've been getting one planet after another, especially those outer planets from Jupiter out to Pluto, have been going retrograde. And in fact, next month, at one point, they will all be retrograde at the same time. And then Pluto comes out of retrograde. So I'll be talking about that in my, my astrology overview for August, and we'll talk about it as it arrives as well. But that's why things are slowing down, because a lot of the social movement, the collective movement, those things that are out of your personal sphere of influence are slowing down. And you're over here like, I'm still ready to play ball. All of the personal planets are like, yeah, I'm still moving direct. What's going on? That too shall change at some point. Mercury is going to go retrograde, and so will Mars by the end of the year. And that's not a bad thing. It just will allow our pace to slow down. So for this new moon, a big focus is letting yourself really sit in your own energy. This new moon is in Leo. Now, we haven't talked about that a ton because so much else is going on, but this is a new moon, the sun and the moon and Mercury in Leo. It's very personal with this because the sun is the ruler of Leo. So it's an expansion of the self, because at this time it is also trining Jupiter, which is stationary. It makes Jupiter even more poignant in its energy. It's saying, hey, we have a punctuation mark right here. This is a moment. And we're kind of like honoring that. So you have Jupiter in trine with the moon and the sun, saying we need to expand on ourselves and then start appreciating ourselves from the inside out once Jupiter goes retrograde and we turn that energy of expansion inward.
Jupiter always feels really heavy to me. Like it's just a heavy planet. And it makes so much sense because it's like literally we've been having something sit on us like this week. It literally feels just like something really too heavy sat on your lap and you can't quite get up.
Yeah.
That's
Jupiter's
what it feels.
the biggest
so for the
planet.
fact that it's stationing is like, yep, sitting on your lap. All right, I guess I'll get up from there. And that's how it, like, for my analogy of that, like, that's genuinely how it feels, which is silly, but like, yeah, that's
no, it makes total sense.
the energy that I feel from it, right?
Yeah. Jupiter is the largest planet there is. You can fit like, I think, don't quote me on this because numbers are not typically my friend, but you can fit at least 3 Saturns in Jupiter. That's right. Pretty sure. I can Google it to be sure. And I will once I get done explaining the actual thing, because I like to give you facts. But then when we look at the other aspects going on, aside from just the new moon that happens to be trine Jupiter, that sounds lovely. It's even in fire where Jupiter and the sun both have triplicity. Kind of nice. Lots of ambition going on with that. Lots of feeling good about ourselves. Then you think about the other things going on, and it's Saturn and Uranus are in square. Mars and Uranus are conjunct. Mercury and Uranus are squared. The North Node and Uranus are conjunct. Are you noticing that something here keeps showing up?
The season of Uranus doing Uranus things.
Right? So this is a lot of surprises that are coming up. Uranus is the surprise, the revolutionary, the epiphany, the genius. kind of thing. It's this snap, the world has changed. And that can be for the better. And when we look at this, again, we have Uranus is not interacting with Jupiter, but the new moon is interacting with Jupiter. So that to me says that we're beginning a cycle where things are ultimately for the benefit. However, Uranus is square with Mercury and Saturn, forming a T square. So that does show that there's some conflict and cross purposes that are going on. And, you know, we have all these retrogrades happening too. This is a time to be revisiting things. So these surprises may be, hey, this is broken. We got to fix it. And then we'll fix it. And then, you know, I hope it's that simple. It's likely not going to be that simple, especially when it comes to collective and social planets, because you need a whole group of people to agree on something in order to make movement, right? So that's another reason why it happens more slowly, because people have to agree. So we're going to be waiting for that to happen. We're going to be looking at that. And I emphasize the waiting because, again, we do have this outer planet retrograde kind of period happening in August. So the way I've chosen to interpret this in my education as an astrologer is like, this seems like a poignant moment. Jupiter being stationed really puts crosses this T and dots this I, where sudden and new information, thanks to Mercury, or circumstances arise, or restrictions even arise because of Saturn square. So we have Mercury, who wants to be speedy, wants to communicate, wants to connect. Saturn, who is restricting that and being a little authoritative about it. And Mercury, who wants to just change everything and, like, you know, chop all of his hair off and get a tattoo, you know, like just something dramatic in a moment that you can do quickly to feel like a whole new person. And they are all kind of arguing with each other over the best way to go about this. And so it becomes sort of a stalemate where everybody's a little frustrated. So this is us wanting to decide things and maybe having to decide things quickly, but carefully, taking into consideration, like, this is a decision I need to make, but I need to at least give myself a breath or try to remember to do that. Thanks to Saturn being there, that opposition, that restriction might give us a little bit of time as well. We'll hope for that. And we also have Mercury is at his evening rise. So another time when Mercury, actually in this case, my personal way of giving pronouns to the planets, Mercury is gender fluid because Mercury can be of the day or of the night. So of the night would be more of a she in this case. So Mercury is of her evening rise, if you want to go that way. I tend to just go there with Mercury because all over the place and I love it. So we have evening rise for Mercury opposing Saturn squaring Uranus. So we have these surprises that are brewing, needing to make decisions quickly but carefully and making our adult choices. We're setting new examples, blazing new paths. And I cannot tell you how many clients I had over the weekend that were like, I just want to make my adult decisions. I want to feel like I'm adulting. Well, you're probably feeling this energy coming in and you're ready for it. So that's great. Again, surprises, birthday parties can be surprises. You know, getting a new car on a game show can be a surprise. It can be a good thing. And I encourage you to look at your chart. If you're still confused after looking at your chart, you can absolutely, like, we can do a reading together or whatever. I'll help you understand how to do that. There's also a course you can do, whatever. But think about how Uranus is configured to your chart. And if there are trines and sextiles, it's probably going to be pretty good natured. If it's angular, it's going to be something very noticeable. If it's not angular, meaning on your ascendant, your descendant, your midheaven, or your IC, so the four corners, like the compass points of your chart, you may not even really notice it a ton because it's not in a highly active area of your chart. It's in my 7th house on my descendant with my sun. So I noticed it when Uranus came into interaction with that. Yeah. So it's a very big part of my life, but some people don't even know what's happening. And that's how life works. We're all unique and individual, and we all have our turns for big moments. Yeah. And the affirmation I have for this is I am prepared for each new moment. And I want to reiterate this. You are ready for this. Because it's not like Uranus just came out of left field to do this. This is cyclical. Everything goes around and comes around. And so it's been building for a while now. Again, you have nature already showing us these things. You have certain movements already showing us these themes. You're going to see it in your personal life as well, especially if it's angular or if it's configured to one of your major planets. So that is how this all comes in. And it's made more personal by this being a new moon, which is the moon being the most personal of all the planets for us.
Is that your puppy?
Yeah. I have 2 puppies in the room. I'm not sure what happened. I zoned out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've got a little girl right here. Yeah. Yep. Zelda's been having a hard day. We've had thunderstorms.
Oh, well, how dare thunderstorms happen in Zelda nearby? Like, no, that's just rude.
Yeah. And thunderstorms are very Uranian as well. Uranos being the god of the sky.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, right.
I also think too, and I wrote it down as you were talking because I was like, oh yeah. Even if you don't know what to manifest because you cannot see way forward with this new moon, just manifest happy surprises. Yeah. That's going to work perfect.
Yeah.
Like, and even if you don't have a concrete thing, just happy surprises, things that make things easier for me, something that makes me smile tomorrow. That is enough. That's enough. Yeah. Feel free to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the suggestions I have is breathe. Just breathe. Practice techniques that help you stay in the moment so that you can be ready to take aligned action and be excited when something does come up instead of being thrown off to the point where you can't even enjoy it if it is a good thing. And choose to be happy in between. And I want to, here's another Uranian thing, playing the lottery. Now here's a fun thing. Last week, for the fun of it, we played the lottery and we decided we were going to be excited about winning. Whether we won or lost, we were going to get our hopes up, because it doesn't hurt to be excited about the possibility of something exciting happening. And if it doesn't happen, at least I was excited instead of dreading having something bad happen and then being disappointed. I could have 50% excitement and then choose to be like, okay, well, that didn't happen, I'm moving on. Or I could be sad, disappointed, and then more disappointed. You pick yours.
Right. Well, and on that note too, I actually did a video about this very recently because it keeps coming up very prominently. Anytime someone comes into a reading with me and they're like, what is my purpose? Like we can dive in and there'll be stuff that comes up and I can definitely always get you clarity. Your guides usually say something about that. But my biggest recommendation as someone who has worked with people and their purposes so extensively, hundreds of clients in this exact space, live like you're living it already, because you are. You don't need to know what it is in order to align your action towards it. Follow the things that bring you joy. Know everything you do on every part of your day is part of your purpose because you're moving towards the grander purpose of things. It's having that intention that because you're doing something today, that thing is in alignment and it is part of your purpose. Same thing with when you're forced to pivot, when you're forced to adjust, when you hit one of the, what I call hell fucking no moments, when all of a sudden everything in your life either stops working entirely or you reach a point where you're like, I cannot move forward anymore. I hate everything. I need to go a different direction. Basically, that's what it is. Live like when you pivot, know that that is part of your purpose, that is part of your alignment. The more you keep that in mind, the more you keep that excitement, the more you keep that understanding that you are in fact living your purpose. I cannot stress enough the way that things get easier.
They really
get easier so deeply. Things get more fun, things get more simple, things get kind of more black and white because like, well, what I'm not doing is not my purpose. So what I am doing is let's go that way. Yeah. It cuts the uhs, I don't knows and stuff out of it. Yeah, there's stuff you don't know. You don't know how it's actually going to be actualized, but you do know what you're doing today and you do know that it's in your purpose. So you're going to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because that's been a whole thing about reiterating what we began with this episode was there's so much that we can't imagine yet because something's going to change that is going to make the way things work differently. Yep. So if you can't see that far ahead, why are you worried what's on the other side of that fence when you can't get to the fence until the fence comes to you? So you might as well just live every day without letting the future destroy the now. Yep. Because then the future is never going to get there. You're never going to be satisfied because you're always going to be worried about the next future that you're imagining. And so you get these little moments of happiness, but you never actually get to be in the happiness. So I highly agree with that for sure. And just making a note of it, the exact conjunction with Uranus and the North Node, I'm looking at my notes here so I can make sure I get it right. Mars will conjunct Uranus on August 1st, but before that, Uranus conjuncts the North Node on the 31st, on the same day that Sun perfects the trine with Jupiter, which will also be retrograde. So these aspects just kind of hang out for a couple days. And then moving into next week, Venus will offer a sextile aspect to Uranus. So that's usually kind of supportive. It's a little helping hand of like, hey, I'm giving you a hand. Would you like it? That kind of thing. And then because they're so close together, Mars will also receive a sextile from Venus, which I can't wait to make that skit because that's probably going to be pretty funny. So that's what we're looking into between this episode and next. The major thing is thinking about the new moon on Thursday and the exact conjunction with Uranus. And we'll bring Mars into it because it's very close Uranus in the North Node on Saturday. And then after that, we've got things kind of unfolding again. It feels like a cork popping off a champagne bottle.
Nice. Perfect. That sounds
right.
Fantastic. Love it. All of it. It's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for listening. It is also our bookend episode, actually.
Oh yeah. Look at that.
Look at us go. So.
Oh no, what did I read this for?
I was just like the same thing. I read a bunch of stuff. What was it called? Shoot. Okay, you should go first because I read it, but I forget what it's called.
I read I read Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. And I read
Isn't it good?
Yeah, I also read Fable. Finally got around to reading Fable. Yeah. I liked Carry On, but funnily enough, it didn't make me want to carry on to the next books in the sequel or the sequels, simply because it was so well done in and of itself. And when I read the descriptions, I was like, that's going to make me feel less excited about this one. And I just really love the way this was. So I'm holding on to that at least for now. Because I thought it was cute. It was one of those catharsis kind of books where the action is there, but it's so character driven. And it really dives into those a lot more. I really appreciated it.
I don't blame you for not wanting to read the second and third. I've read the second. I haven't done the third yet. There's one scene in the second book where they go to a Renaissance fair, though, in America. Oh, no. And it is the funniest scene. I laughed so hard at this scene because it's like they're all British, right? Yeah. And they're at this American Renaissance fair, like, what is going on? It's perfect. So that would literally be the only reason I recommend the second one. The first one is a masterpiece.
Yeah. And then Fable, to the point that you've always made about Fable, excellent description of having psychic abilities. Loved it. I think what bothered me about it though was I was listening to the audiobook, which made some of the narrative choices in sentence structure very obvious. And to my neurodivergent brain, the fact that every sentence was a sentence, gerund, another sentence, it was like, there was always I walked looking around the corner. He spoke looking down at me, or there was always like a second part that could have been a second sentence, so I just found myself wondering how I'd write it to make it more pleasing to my ear. But the story was pretty good. Again, though, when it got to the end, it was just finally getting into like the meat of what I was excited to hear about. And then all of a sudden the ending score played and I was like, wait, why? Why is that over?
It's a cliffhanger for sure.
Yeah. And I wasn't clear because I like to also just test my story structure know-how. So I'll be like, we've reached the first plot point. Oh, we've reached the midpoint. I couldn't really figure out where that was because it was a little bit, the tension held, but it was just, there was no up and down. So there was no like this happened. And there was no angular points in the chart of this book, as I like to talk about when I talk about using astrology to write your books. It didn't have the angular points as much as I was looking out for. So I was caught by surprise when it ended. I would have liked a little bit more of a resolution to that current arc.
That is fair. It's absolutely fair.
But the way,
go for it.
The way that Fable talks to crystals, which again, she talks to gems. I get it. She's a gem sage, but crystals. And so it was just like, oh my gosh, it's like, me. That's fantastic.
It's amazing. I love it so much. It's really good. It's really, really good. I've never related to a book character more than I've related to Fable. Ever. So swimming is like my favorite thing on planet Earth to do. I grew up in Tahoe, obviously. So diving in like clear waters, totally related to her there. Yeah. She talks to crystals, totally related to her. That it was just, she even has red hair. She's like, like, it was just one of those things where I read that and I was like, okay, all right then. And the cool thing is the author wrote it in Tahoe. So that's the other part of it. Yeah. So I love it.
Talk about really leaning into that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what did you read?
I read a really fantastic. So I have a thing with, I really like Hollywood stuff, which is a weird way of putting that, but it's especially like stories. Like I loved Evelyn Hugo like so much because it had some of that Hollywood element, which I just think is really fascinating because it's, for some reason, I really get into the psychological side of how people handle fame. And I think it's just really fascinating because it's like a microcosm, because we've never had that before the last essentially 100 years. And that is really cool because it's just something that's developing in like a space, right? Yeah. Super neat. So I read a book called Breaking Character by Lee Winter, and it was a really cool sapphic romance in like a Hollywood kind of setting. It was really, really well done. It was handled beautifully, and I just sincerely appreciated it. I thought it was awesome. So I read that. What else did I read? Is it particularly high vibration? I don't know if I call it super high vibration, but it was really good and it was super fun and I enjoyed listening to it. So that was that. Or reading. I have actually read it on my Kindle. And then I read Guild. I finished Guild.
Okay. How was it? Because I've looked at that.
It's a super book talk heavy. Like it's a big book talk buzz. Honestly, I liked it. I really like the idea, like their Fae origin story is really cool. Like the Fae origin story is neat. I'm really excited to see how that kind of develops. It doesn't have plot.
Oh,
like it's not a super, like it kind of does. It was enough to not make me bored when I was reading it. But it's not a lot happens. Also check trigger warnings. Also, the first scene is an orgy.
Okay, good.
So no one says that. And I was on a plane and I was like, all right then. And there was like a 12-year-old sat next to me. So I'm like reading the book like tiny so that like they can't look over my shoulder and read it. Because it's the first scene is an orgy. And I'm very intrigued. It's for those of you who don't know, it's kind of a King Midas retelling, kind of, but done in a fairy space. I'm going to be really honest. It's weird. It's really, really weird. And everyone says that it's this romance. The first book has no romance. And if you think it's a romance, I am very concerned for you as a person. The first book is not a romance. The first book is, it's not. The world is cool. It's really interesting. I'm very confused by the ending. I'm very, very confused. That is the best way I can describe it. I hope her writing gets better with each book. I think it does. This first book was rough. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, so I read that. It was fine. I will not recommend the series until I have read more. I'm like a quarter of the way through the next one. And still very little has happened. So we'll see. People tend to say that it gets better with the second one and really better with the third. So we'll see. But it's that's a lot of books to commit to for it to get better, and is my generalized kind of thought there. So that as I think all that I read. I've been doing more, research for La Costa, and so a lot of my reading time has been about ancient Rome.
Yeah, my next month is going to be I'm doing a lot of research for my How to Write Your Book Using Astrology book. Okay. So I'm doing a lot of astrological research, and I'm totally okay with that, but I'll be able to talk more about fun facts that I come up with that. It just may not be a fiction heavy month coming up, because I do have this Astromagia speech that I want to be able to apply. I already have a ton of sources, but I love to over prepare. So I found one that I'm very curious about and I need to get it read.
Yeah. Also on that note, just for real quick, I did get the box set for the Tea Dragon Society, and it's beautiful and amazing. And I love it with all of my heart. Not a super deep plot there, but it is so cute if you just want to flip through a book and look at pretty drawings. And basically the dragons grow tea off of their antlers, and that's how tea happens, and it's so cute. So I've read the first one, but I got the box set and I'm really excited to read the other ones. I also, because a lot of book banning is happening, and I am super, 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 super against book banning. Currently in Virginia, there is a lawsuit trying to ban the sale, which book banning doesn't usually get to that extent, but a full-on lawsuit trying to ban the sale of a book called Genderqueer. It is a graphic novel, and it's actually a biography of the author, discovering their kind of gender identity. And the fact it's that and A Court of Mist and Fury that are in the lawsuit because they claim obscene material that should not be distributed. And I'm like, you know what, sue Playboy. But anyway, beside the point. So if you can, if this bothers you the way that it bothers me, first of all, we've had the owner of Betty's Pages bookstore on here before. She shares a lot of amazing content in regard to book banning on her TikTok, which is Betty's Pages. So please go look at her stuff if you want more information. But on top of that, if you can buy genderqueer from an indie bookstore in Virginia, it actually genuinely helps, and they are going through it. Or if you live in Virginia and you can check it out from any of your libraries, please do, because it shows there's interest in caring about the book and that it's not some obscene material, which it's not. I mean, trigger warnings, it's a gender identity like discovery story, and it's a graphic novel, so like there's some parts, but like, yeah, so that's my 2 cents on that one too. And that's something else I committed to like purchasing this week, or 2 weeks ago. I got it this week. I haven't fully read it. I flipped through it. It's really beautifully done, and the prose is really nice. And it is, like I said, a graphic novel, but it's very interesting.
So I looked up the book on Amazon just to be able to get an idea of it. First of all, the deluxe memoir edition, which is the one I will be finding from a Virginia bookstore, it's got constellations on the cover, so I'm in. But even further than that, it's an intensely cathartic autobiography about air, or I don't know if air, I think is the correct spelling here of the pronoun, their path to identifying as non-binary and asexual and coming out to their family and society.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Cool.
So
Gonna buy it.
Yeah. It's really cool. And I just like, the poor author does not deserve this about their story.
Especially
like,
when it's about their story. That's so annoying.
Exactly.
Well, it's story, clearly.
Yeah. So, yeah, please do that. I just can't say that enough. Please do that, please. The author doesn't have Sarah J. Maas's backing of financial support from a huge publisher, etc. So that's the other reason it's super important to purchase this one. And if, for those of you who don't know, book banning is happening at a highest rate in basically 100+ years across the country for anything that people are deeming obscene, which tends to be anything that mentions any sort of queer identity, gay, LGBTQ, Black Lives Matter, BIPOC stuff. So if you want to look up any like the books being banned in your state, look them up and then go take them out from your library, go buy them from an indie bookstore. Anything like that will genuinely help. And it's something that we're really passionate about, and I'm particularly passionate about. I get really triggered. My mom was a librarian for years, so like this matters to me on such a deep level because I know the stuff that they have to go through for that, and it's a lot. So that's my pitch for supporting the book community, please. But yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Happy new moon, happy conjunctions. You will make it through. We're here to support you. Yes, thank you so much. And we hope that you take all of this stuff that's happening and you go make some magic.
Were we? Okay. Yours definitely shows up more than mine does in the audio, so I trust you.